For most of us millennials, rap music has played an integral part of our lives. It's entertained us, it's livened us, and for many of us, it's been a source of inspiration. But rap music hasn't always carried the positive outlook and individualism that rappers such as Kanye West, Jermaine Cole, and Chance the Rapper preach about today. In fact, in the 1990s, we saw a shift from criminality to these positive themes. And specifically, we saw a shift in album artwork. Album artwork set the precedent for the image of rap music, not just the themes and the ideas. And today, I want to talk about that image. Specifically, I want to talk about two things. I want to talk about the observable characteristics of album artwork from the 1990s to the 21st century. And I want to talk about a potential source for the catalyst that changed the way album artwork was portrayed by artists today. But first, our story starts with a young man. This young man graduated high school in 1991 in the south side of Chicago. I wanted to explore what this young man might have seen when he walked into a record store in 1995. So, I looked at Complex's list of the 90 best rap albums of the 1990s, and these are the most popular 8. Now, there are 3 characteristics that we see in almost all rap albums from the 1990s and their album artwork. First of all, we see depictions of self. Tupac, Mobb Deep, Outkast, Jay-Z. Everywhere we look, we see some sort of depiction of these rappers, which wouldn't have been as much of an issue if it wasn't for the second notion. The idea that the criminal or gangster connotation or persona that these rappers sought to uphold. We look at it with Mobb Deep with the flat hat. We look at it with Raekwon. It's tough to see, but he's clutching a wine bottle while surrounded in smoke. We look at Enter the Wu-Tang, who has a mask on. All of these are criminal and gangster connotations of personas that were accepted at the time. And lastly, all of these album artworks are very clustered. Every single ounce of white space is filled in all of these rap album artworks. Now I want to talk about this boy again. This boy walked into the recording studio, or he would walk into a record store, and he didn't necessarily like what he saw. So he changed it. And that boy was Kanye West. Now there are 3 characteristics that set Kanye's album artwork aside from the album artwork of the 1990s. First, in many of Kanye's albums, he didn't include his name or the album title. Actually, in all of the albums listed here, there were only 2 in which he did, Late Registration and 808s and Heartbreak. The second characteristic of Kanye's albums that make them different from rap albums of the 1990s was his minimalist focus. We first saw this in 808s and Heartbreaks, while the first 3 albums he had were very charismatic of the 1990s. We first saw it with 808s and Heartbreaks, where he draws his attention only to the crinkled heart that you see portrayed on the album. You see this in My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, in the way that he released 5 different album covers, but all of them were portrayed in the mini frame surrounded by the sea of red. And you see the ultra-minimalist focus in Yeezus, where he doesn't even provide album artwork. Here he's making a statement about his music, which is where he wants the audience to put all of their attention. And lastly, we see more symbolism and less gangster. None of the gangster themes and characteristics that we saw in the 1990s rap album artwork is present in any of Kanye's work. Instead, we try to see a richer sense of symbolism, like in The Life of Pablo, where he puts the life of Pablo multiple times to represent the way a printing press works and its imperfections. And that brings us to me. This is a picture of me when I was 10 years old. What would it have looked like in 2010, or what would it look like now, when someone just like me would log onto iTunes and look at the album artwork? This is what it would look like. And Kanye West set a precedent for all of these albums. First, we see that in many of these albums, there's no name, or it's very not noticeable. We see it in Untitled Unmastered from Kendrick Lamar. We see it in Nothing Was the Same, where Drake's tiny name in the corner could possibly blend in as a cloud. Second of all, we see a minimalist focus. Once again, we see this in Untitled Unmastered, but we also see it in Channel Orange by Frank Ocean. And we see it in Beyonce's self-titled album, Beyonce. And lastly, we see more symbolism and less gangster. Even though J. Cole's 2014 Forest Hill Drives had a lot of criminal notions, the album artwork is much more positivistic. We see him sitting on top of his childhood home. This is meant to be rooted in symbolism, and it's meant to represent that he's not as much at the top of the rap game as much as he's at the top of his own game. Rap music has presented all sorts of different themes, ideas, and messages. But album artwork presents the image for rap music, and that image has greatly changed since the 1990s. Thank you.